Not the Footy Show.
Forward sizzle.
When you overcook the meal.
A few HIAs right there, eh?
Yeah, no good.
No good.
Nice. Please don't put that in our preamble. I'm just looking at your team here. I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all.
Again, this is it's kind of a combo between what I think they're going to go with versus sort of what I'd like to see them do. G'day everybody, welcome to episode 279 of Not the Footy Show. It is time for another deep dive. This time it's the Canterbury Bulldogs. I'm Warrick Nicolson. That is Robb Cox coming to you on the podcast and all over YouTube, Coxsmith. We've made the recommendation list. What's happened?
It's gone viral.
I hate that word.
Well, it's a hard word to say in these COVID times, but yes, we've gone viral. We are recommended. We're loved. We're cherished. We're national treasures.
I don't think it's about us, Coxsmith, just to clarify. I think it's people have an insatiable appetite to devour all things West Tigers, which is the whole point about what we're doing with these deep dives. We're picking the teams that we pretty much think people want to read about or listen about, and that's why we went down there. So thank you very much to everyone who's watching the Tigers one. The watch hours is crazy, so we really appreciate the fact you've actually stuck through looking at our two ugly mugs for the best part of an hour. Speaking of ugly mugs, well, used to be, and I'm not trying to be harsh here, but can we just say what a wonderful job Phil Gould has not only done with the Bulldogs roster, but his own health? Have you noticed how fit Gus is looking lately?
Yeah. He looks really good. He looks like he's dropped, probably a dozen or so kilos at least, and he's looking younger. And mate, he's kicking goals at the Bulldogs. He's getting people. He's not only getting players, but he's getting staff. There's been a couple of staff.
Yep.
I think from the Tigers go there.
Yep.
Over the last 18 months, and then he's got his coach. He's got Ciraldo there.
Yep.
He's even bringing back players from the virtual death in Josh Reynolds. Everyone wants a piece.
No. Gus told us on Twitter that he wasn't bringing Reynolds back. He assured us. You mean Gus maybe had an omission there? Of the truth?
I've got a list here, and unless it's a typo, it's got J Reynolds on it. So
he's on a
Josh Reynolds
train and trial deal. He's the big name in regards to that. 18 or 2. It's 20 months I think since Gus took over as GM of football, and just stick to Gus. Wonderful job. I think he had back surgery, and that's what sort of helped get him to a point where he's now fight and fit. And what he's done with the recuperation of this Bulldogs roster is nothing short of incredible. I was impressed with what Tim Sheens has done in his time frame. Gus probably had a more dire situation in terms of playing talent than even Tim did taking over the Tigers. Because the criticism of the Tigers has always been, they can't take the next step, they can't make the top 8. Yes, they went backwards and won the wooden spoon last year, but the Bulldogs have not shown a lot of hope in a long time. Well, it feels like a long time, and I'm sure there's a few Bulldogs fans that feel like it's about 20 years. He's got his coach in Cameron Ciraldo. He beat out Tim Sheens for him. He's got two really big names for 2023 in Viliame Kikau and Reed Mahoney. And he's also loosened the purse strings at $8.25 a season, reportedly for Stephen Crichton from 2024. I know I talked about the Parramatta acquisitions from the mid-90s, and Gus did a similar thing at the Roosters, if you remember, during that period when he took over in 95, don't you? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Well, the big thing Gus did, his first big move on the chessboard of the Roosters was to bring Fittler in, really, or the first thing that was really noticed, because of his leaving Penrith, and then Fittler followed suit. And this is a little bit like history repeating itself.
Exactly.
Maybe,
That's kind of my point here, is that he's... that whole handshake agreement. I won't take any players, or won't take any. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? As far as I'm concerned, that everyone's on. Whoever's on the market is fair play. As long as you're not pulling players away from contracts, which I don't believe Gus has done. I think it's business as usual, and I think he did a phenomenal job with the Roosters, and I think. I it's looking like this Bulldog side will be part of his legacy. The way that they're building,
I think that's why he took the job. That's why he took the job.
They've still got to do the business on the field,
yeah,
which the Roosters have done. Obviously, if you look back through the record books, if you're too young to know, but yeah, mate, I can't speak highly enough of Gus as a football administrator. I think he's amazing. I think he's the best in the business. And anyone who passed on Gus would be silly, I think, and would probably be annoyed with themselves.
Dragons.
So yeah, Dragons. Yes.
The team I feel sorry for still is the Warriors, because he probably would still be in that gig if COVID had happened and effectively squashed his ability to recreate that junior system over there. So the Bulldogs are the big winners. The other signings they've made for 2023 include Ryan Sutton from the Raiders, Farmanu Brown, they picked up from the Tigers, Andrew Davey from Manly, Hayes Perham, one to watch, kids, from the Eels, Franklin Pele from the Sharks. They've signed Josh Reynolds on a train and trial deal. They've also got a young bloke called Jacob Preston from the Eastern Suburbs system. I think he played for Norths in the South Wales Cup last year, but the problem he had was there's a lot of back rowers running around Chookland, and the Bulldogs came in and swooped and got him, and they have a very big, high opinion of him. And BX, does that tickle any player names when I give the initials BX, mate?
Bronson.
For 2024, that's the chat, is that he's signed actually a deal when he comes off his drug ban.
It's a done deal.
It's a done deal. I reckon it's gone under the radar a little bit.
Yeah, he probably has, but if they've got him, then that answers one question that I was going to ask you later on. Obviously if he comes back in the same kind of form that he had when he left or when he was sat down. Look, mate, looking
it's a long
through
list is what I'm telling you.
Yeah, looking through the signings and looking through just the 17 that you've written down here for us. I mean, the future's bright, mate. The future's bright. They've got a good coach. They've got a great administrator. And they've got what's turning into, on paper anyway, a really well-rounded team that doesn't look like it's lacking in too many places.
Do you think the happiest person at Belmore is one Jay Addo-Carr? Because when he signed to come to Canterbury, he copped it deluxe, didn't he? Oh, you're going to lose every game, and there's no hope there. And I mean, he got his fullback money to play on the wing. We'll talk about that again when we get to Crichton. But Addo-Carr's got to be just cheering, because not only has he got a lot of quality joining the side, but the bloke who wouldn't pass in the ball last year's gone as well, and Aaron Shop.
Yeah. Well, you're right there. Look, just on Josh Addo-Carr's pay, I think he brings more to the football team than just what he does on the football field. So I can't argue with his pay. I mean, he showed us at the World Cup what he's worth, given if he's surrounded by players that will kind of play to the way that he wants to play, and he in his supporting role as well. He's very, very good at that. So I can't argue too much with that. And who knows, if Avarillo was to go down early in the season, Addo-Carr may find himself with the number one on his back for a couple of games. Maybe not as well.
We'll get to the positional battles in a second. Let's just talk about the people who Gus has convinced to depart or punted out the door. Aaron Shop, Josh Jackson, Jeremy Marshall-King, Paul Vaughan, Corey Allen, Jack Hetherington, Ava Sayumina-Fangai, Joe Stimson, Brandon Wakeham, and Matt Duffy left halfway through last year. That's like the bulk of the team that played regular football the last 2 years.
Yep. Yeah, and you know what? I think every single one of those guys obviously didn't fit into the script that Gus was writing, and needed to find the door or be shown the door. And you got to make hard decisions as an administrator or a football boss of a football club, and I don't think Gus is shy in making those decisions, and they need to be made. It's business,
That's what you want to see from an administrator, from a CEO or a GM of football or whatever it is. Like, don't just we go back to the Dragons pod we did 2 episodes ago. Rather than patching all the holes, just start the new ship. Start building the new ship.
Yep. Yep. Mate, you just got to be prepared to have a tough year or two, and then you'll come out the other end, probably looking a lot better than when you went in. So, and Gus knows that. But this has been pretty quick. This isn't one of those ones where they're down in the doldrums for too long. Gus has really taken an active approach on this and turned the ship around forcefully since he's been there.
Yeah, since he's been there, I think if you're a Bulldogs fan, you're not saying, well, it's been quick because they've been enduring the poor performances before he arrived. But the transformation he's doing is quickly.
You've got to go back to what was happening at the Bulldogs before Gus got there. There's a lot of infighting going on. There was a power struggle, a very well-documented power struggle between the old school Bulldogs family and, some new people that were on the board and whatnot. And that wasn't good for the football club. There were appointments that were being made and players being signed that probably shouldn't have been signed, or appointments being made. And they struggled because of that mess going on in the background. And it seems to me, without having an insider's knowledge, that Gus has come in and probably sat everyone down and in Gus fashion has said, listen, pull your heads in. I'll fix the football side of it. All right. You guys stick to your poker machines.
Yep.
I'll fix the football. Stay out of it.
Yep.
Don't get your nose in my business. All right. If you want me to stay, give me free rein. Give me the checkbook. I'll do what needs to be done. And I think, I don't know Gus personally, but from what I've seen over the last 40 years of watching football and watching Gus, through that time, I think that's the way it would have been played out. There would have been a line in the sand and he would have said, this is my side of the line. I'm not going to go over and cross over onto your side, and do not come into here. I want free rein. That's the only way I'm coming to this football club. And I reckon that's how it happened.
The other thing that was working in Gus's favour, as difficult it may have been for him in the first 3 or 4 months, but remember, he signed when we were in the second lockdown in 2021.
Yep.
So there wouldn't have been this face-to-face stuff happening that comes when you join a new organisation. He would have been able to get stuff done for 3 to 4 months to 5 months behind the scenes before he had that conversation you're talking about. He just would have said to him, clearly, let me do my job. And then he would have walked in and said, now sort yourselves out. I've got all this stuff already done. And for the next 18 months, just sit back and keep your mouth shut and let me do my gig. Because the thing with Gus, and I've said it many times on this pod, but for him, it's the challenge, I think, that's brought him back to this gig. It's that legacy word that you used before. Because everyone knew Gus was a talented player. I mean, if you want to see Gus at his peak, South 86 versus Canterbury at Belmore, it's a Monday night football game late in the season. It was on Fox the other day, but just look it up. He just pulls apart the two-time defending premiers like a knife through butter as an undersized lock forward. It's quite stunning to watch. But for him, he stopped coaching in the NRL in 99, and that's a long time ago. And as much as he may have been happy in his gig and the rest of it for the last 20-odd years, I have a feeling that there's sort of, there's still that burning desire, a bit like Tim Sheen's, where it's like, I can still cut it here. I want to see if I can do what I'm saying, but people aren't doing. And that's something that I like about Gus, is that he will back up his words. He might not always tell it as clear cut as what he might suggest he does, but he gets the job done. And that's rugby league. You've got to have a bit of bluster and bravado about you, as well as the actual ability to do it.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people get annoyed that possibly Gus is pulling those kind of strings in the coaching, But I think you got to look at it like this: Gus being the head of football at a club like Penrith in the past, if things aren't happening in the coaching department, that's part of the football club.
Yep.
And if things aren't happening in the coaching department the way that he thinks it should be happening, then he, as the boss of football, should be able to say, this is not right. I want it done like this. That's not him trying to be the coach. That's him directing the football as the director of football or the boss of football in the way he wants it to go. And I think he is well within his rights to do that, as long as that's the understanding of the coach that's come in there. So I don't think Gus is trying to be a coach. I don't think he's trying to be the boss of everything, even though that may seem like that to some people. He's just trying to get things done the way he wants them done because he knows what needs to be done to bring success. So, yeah, he definitely probably does say to the coach, let's do it this way because I think this, and this. And I don't think that should be misread, though, as him trying to be the coach. I just think he's trying to look after the thing. But anyway, enough about Gus.
We will come back to that. I want to talk about the whole Ciraldo philosophy when we've gone through the team, because here is the squad that I've written down that I think is close to the mark for what round one may look like. It's hard when you're doing these sides because part of you wants to put in the players you think are the best. The other part of it is you've got to understand the dynamics of who's been there longer or why they've been brought in. And we obviously don't see every training session throughout the off-season. So part of it's what we want. Part of it is what we think Gus and Ciraldo will want to go with. So if you'd like to go through it, feel free.
Sure, mate. Yeah, look, I agree with... I'm agreeing with all of these here, to be honest with you. Not because they lack depth, just because, I mean, there's a couple of little asterisks which we can go through, but let's go through your 1 to 17 and stop me if you want to talk about it. But you've got Jake Averillo at fullback.
Stop. Let's talk about that.
Okay. So you've got him there. Obviously, he was there last year. Yeah. Tell me about that. Tell me about Jake Averillo.
I think he's the best fit for him to start, but it depends on what kind of player you want there. I think he's a footy player. Okay, I don't think he's particularly great ball player. I think he's just a particularly great support player. He's not a particularly great runner, but he's kind of good at it all without being really good at it. And this is the problem that you got if you're the Bulldogs is, do you persist with a player that looks like he has the ability to sniff out a try, but isn't a standout in any particular area and hope that he gets better playing along Burton in that role? Or do you go with a new option or a runner? The new option is a guy called Hayes Perham, who played a lot of fullback in the Warriors system, played fullback, centre, wing, 5/8 last year for Parramatta, and ended up playing a couple of games in first grade on the wing, where I reckon he looked a little bit lost, but he's more of a ball player. Or do you go down the running route, which is Jacob Kiraz, and try and replicate the whole Dylan Edwards philosophy from Penrith? I think Averillo gives him the best of most areas of that group, but I don't think it's like it's going to be handed to him and here it is. He's going to have to show in the off-season that he's the best mix for that. And that's why I've probably got him there from the incumbency point of view. I think there's a footy player there, but I can understand how some people look at him and go, limited.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think he is very, he fits into a lot of different molds. He can play a bit of 5'8", a bit of centre. If you needed to him, he'd probably run it on the wing as well. But I think the only one that's going to be really pressuring him in the short term is either Kiraz or Hayes Perham. Yeah. But I think at first up, he'll probably get the nod. Just because he's pretty solid at fullback. It'll be a different story next year in 2024, but we won't get too far ahead of ourselves. On the wings, you've got that man I just mentioned, Jacob Kiraz, and Josh Adokar. Obviously, I don't have any problems with both of them starting on the wings because I think Kiraz does need another year playing wing if he wants to convert into a centre or a fullback. And obviously Josh Adokar picks himself. Yeah.
They got some try scoring ability there. Obviously you got Adokar, who we know scores tries, but Kiraz shows a bit.
Yeah,
I like him.
Absolutely.
Like him. The centres, this is where the bolters come in and the reason they got rid of Shop. Shop was on an okay contract, had a couple of years to go, I think it was. But the Bulldogs went, we can get rid of that and we can sign other players with that money and bring in potentially two juniors. They've still got Braden Burns under contract now. The poor bloke just can't seem to stay healthy, but when he's healthy, Gus is a fan. We know Gus is a fan from way back when he was in the Penrith system, went to South, then Canterbury. So I think he gets first crack if he's healthy. His biggest threat, I think, is Averillo, and they decide to go in that direction. In terms of the rookies, though, and this is the reason that I'd be excited if I'm a Dogs fan, They got two of them. They got Paul Alamoti, who's like 19 years old and has carved up in the junior system. Played a bit in New South Wales Cup last year. Battled injury last year though, which is the biggest challenge for him, unfortunately. And that's probably the biggest knock is, at 18 or 19, is your body ready for regular first grade football? That'll be the challenge for him. You have to show that during the off season. Another one is Jeral Skelton, who is a New South Wales Waratah squad member convert who put up gaudy tackle break numbers and run meter numbers in New South Wales Cup when he played last year. So they're the two that I think are fighting for the other centre spot if Averillo is left at fullback. Have you heard anything about this Alamoti kid?
I actually have. I've heard his name being bandied around, but I don't know a whole lot about him. But generally, if their name gets mentioned a few times, that they're probably a pretty good prospect, but from multiple sources.
His challenge is he's run over blokes for the last 5 years, and you come to first grade, you don't run over blokes. That's the challenge with players like that who dominate at junior level.
Sure. And I think what's the centre's name from Parramatta that did the same thing?
Jacob Locko.
No, the Penasini.
Oh, Penasini, yeah.
I think he did a lot of running over other players in his junior football days. And I think he's only just starting to find his feet.
Oh, I think he made a good impact last year. But
I think he did too.
Yeah. If the Bulldogs get what Parramatta got from Penasini from Alamoti, happy days. I really like the idea of, and we'll get to the bigger name addition, Kikau, but if the left-hand side is Burton, Kikau, Alamoti and Adokar, you'd want the ball to go left if you're a Bulldogs fan, that's for sure. It's a strong left.
But anyway, let's see what happens there. In the halves, you've got Matt Burton and Kyle Flanagan. Again, I think they picked themselves to begin with. Look, I'll say it again. I sound like a broken record, but I think Matt Burton's best position is centre. But for this team, where they are at the moment, obviously 5'8" is where he's going to be with his big boot, and he's and he can play 5'8".
He's just re-signed.
Yeah, I think it's
play centre. He's not.
No, I know. No, I get it. But the irony of it is a little bit like Laurie Daly back in the day. I think Matt Burton's
sorry, don't you dare speak that man's name. You watch your mouth.
I think Matt Burton is one of the top three centres in the world. I really do. I think he's a fantastic centre. He's certainly not in the top 3 5'8" in the world at the moment. He well could be. They say the kid can do anything, so we'll see. I do like him at 5'8" though in this team as it stands for them. Kyle Flanagan, what are your thoughts on Kyle Flanagan? I think this year is going to be the make or break year for Kyle Flanagan. He has to, put up or shut up. That's the way it's got to be.
How long has he got audition? How long is his audition for 2024? Is it the whole season, or is it about 6 weeks before they just go after somebody else massively?
Well, if they do,
for 2024, I mean, yeah.
If they do go for somebody else, they're going to have to go outside of the club because I don't know of any juniors in there who are likely halfbacks, but I don't think it's going to be Josh Reynolds, and I don't think Burton is going to play halfback with Averillo at 6. So they're going to have to go out. I mean, you've got for Manu Brown, who can play a little bit of half.
Which is why I think he's been brought on board to just give them that option if Flanagan clearly just can't get this team ticking.
Yeah, but you know what? Last year, mate, there were times last year where Flanagan looked all right. He wasn't – I don't think he was shocking. I just think he fades in and out of games a little bit, which is generally the sign of a young player, and he's not that young anymore. I think he's 24 or 25. I'm not sure how much Flanagan likes the rough stuff. Some players thrive on a bit of that. I don't think Kyle, to me, sometimes looks like the type of player that could play in a dinner suit.
Yeah.
But
is that the result of structure, though? Too much structure growing up?
Probably.
That's what he screams to me as a player who's had every natural attacking thing coached out of him. And it's like, this is how you run a football team. You got to do this. you got to do this, you got to turn the ball inside, you got to kick long, blah, blah, blah. That as harsh as it might sound, that might be this result of growing up the son of a coach. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if his dad has done that to him, but it certainly looks like he's checking off a mental checklist as he goes. But let's hope that when Ciraldo's obviously got his hands on him now, and Gus is there and has had a bit of time with him. Let's hope they can turn him into being the player that he can be, because I know it's a different level of football, but I remember seeing him play in the New South Wales Cup, and he was very, very good.
Okay,
and the Roosters didn't buy him because they thought he was average. The Roosters saw something. Robinson doesn't just buy players for no reason. There was something there, and then there wasn't.
Funny though, the other thing about the Flanagan signing, I think we touched on it in one of the Recruitment Whispers recently, but it felt your hindsight tells you or suggests to you that it was just a stopgap signing. Because they had to wait till one S Walker had turned 18, if you remember.
Well, history will say that. I think that's a little bit of a pessimistic way to look at it. I mean, they signed him for something like $700,000 or $600,000. It's a lot of money to throw away to wait for an 18-year-old to come online. I'm not putting a line through Flanagan yet. I'll put it this way. I've got more hope in Flanagan than I do Luke Brooks.
Okay.
There, I said it. I don't think that, I think Kyle Flanagan still has a hope.
Well, do you want to go through who would be the possible replacements now, or do you want to get through the rest of the team and come back to?
No, we'll hit us now. Hit us with the top 3, 4.
Okay, are the players who are, and I could be wrong, I did a quick little run through, but the players who are off contract at the end of 2023 who play in these positions from other clubs, you've got, Mitchell Moses, who has a player option for 2024 that he can pretty much kick in at any time he likes, and I just can't see it happening because he'll want to, if he stays at Parramatta, it's an upgrade city, that's what's happening there. You've got Jack Whiten, who has a player option for 2024 with the Raiders. Now, he's not a halfback, but there's a name for you.
Not a half. Yep.
Sean Johnson at the Warriors. He's off contract. You've got the dynamic duo of Adam Dwayne and Luke Brooks at the Tigers. And I'll throw a name at you. Brad Schneider from the Raiders, who got a taste of first grade last year. I'm not saying that he's, superstar status or anything like that. I'm just saying he is a name that is off contract who is stuck behind Jay Fogarty at the Raiders. Now, it's just one of those things. What I'm basically underscoring here is the list isn't that long, Cocksmith, of guys who are off contract at the end of 2023.
And look, that going back to our Tigers episode, that could be a reason why they hung on to Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
I think the more I think about it, the more I think this thing about we're digressing for one moment from the Bulldogs to the Tigers. The more I think about it, the more I think that this thing between Hastings and Bateman is true and is big, because to me, Hastings looked a much more of a dangerous player last year than Brooks did at halfback,
mm-hmm.
and they let him go.
They also got Clemmer. It wasn't like they just cleared out a player to get someone else from elsewhere. They got a player in the deal who they reportedly wanted. So I
get it, but I guess it goes back to this halfbacks being thin on the ground thing. What you just said, and Brad Schneider, I don't know, man. I young guy having a go, and good luck to him. But I just don't see Gus bringing Brad Schneider into the team.
He's got some youngsters that he's added to the squad this year in development contracts, Gus. So yeah, I'm with you.
You got any names there? You know who the halves are in this list?
I think Joseph O'Neill is a half. I think Isaac. I got to double check, but definitely Joseph O'Neill is a half in that mix.
Okay.
And they've obviously still got Bally Biondi Odo, who hurt his knee. Been playing. Actually, I like to look at him as a spark plug kind of player. but he's done his knee at the end of 2022, so he won't be back for at least half the year in first.
Do you see him more as a 14 than a 7? Then?
I actually think he's a 7, but he got thrown into the 14 role by Barrett, and sometimes that's not the best thing for a young half.
Sure.
So Flanagan, I think, has got 6 to 8 weeks to not completely stuff things up, and he'll be the halfback for the rest of the year. But if they start badly, I can see him being the fall guy for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, let's get through the rest of the team. So we'll go back to Flanagan in a moment, just because I want to know what their first 6 games are. But let's go to Tavita Pangai Jr. You got him at lock.
I think that's the best place to try and utilise him. They've got a lot of back rowers, which you could argue he moved into the front row, but I think you've got to get him on the field. You can't leave him on the bench. And if he burns out, he burns out, and then you just move on. But you've got to give him maybe a chance to succeed, and that is not plugging him out on an edge and hoping he gets involved. No, you put him in the middle and you say, just do your thing, Tavita. Just do it more often.
Yeah. I tend to agree, and I tend to think that, with the addition of some players coming into this team, like Sutton and Kikau, I think it creates a little bit of space, breathing space for Tavita, but it also brings a bit of pressure, meaning it's now time, Tavita. It's now time to really be consistent, with your performances, barring injury and whatnot. I agree. I think he's a lock. Second rowers, you've got Raymond Fatala Mariner and aforementioned Viliame Kikau.
I think Kikau on the left, RFM on the right, that'll be the mix. And Gus is a huge opinion of Raymond. I can see him getting first crack. I know they did sign guys like Andrew Davey, and they've got players like Jackson Tapine and Chris Patolo in the mix. But I just, unless they decide Pangai is playing on an edge, I'd like Raymond on the right. That's my preference if I'm a Bulldogs man. The bench being, front row, Max King.
Biggest signing, though, was Reed Mahoney, I think.
Yeah, he could change the complete way they play at Canterbury.
Yeah.
And I want to get to that shortly, but just finish out the team. Max King, probably the best signing of last year for next to no money and return. The Bulldogs claimed him up from no man's land, basically, and he turned into probably their most consistent forward last year. And Ryan Sutton would be the other starting prop. Bench, Davey, Luke Thompson, who may not be long for this world if he doesn't shape up for Gus, because Gus has been happy to move him on for a number of years now.
Well, the reason, but we've got to say what the reason is. The reason is he's taking up a fair bit of cap space.
Yeah.
And he's probably arguably, or maybe not so arguably, not delivering on what those dollars are to date anyway, of what those dollars have been paying him. So he needs to come off that bench, firing straight away.
And the last 2 spots, Corey Waddell probably gets a spot because he can play middle as well as edge, and Manu Brown as the utility. So that's the way I look at the bench. Andrew Davey probably has the inside running there. He is an option to start on an edge if they decide that Raymond needs to be at lock and Pangai come off the bench. But I just think he's a big enough body that can play both areas. Same with Waddell, and Manu Brown is the utility now because Beyond Iodo is injured, as I mentioned. So the other players that are in that squad, got Franklin Pele, who they picked up from the Sharks. If they can get some endurance into those legs, he could be an option there. Young Declan Casey is an outside back. Jaden Okunbor, I think his first grade time, I think it's past him now, unfortunately. Ever since that knee reco, he just hasn't looked the same player. You've got Skelton, you've got young Jacob Preston, who's a back rower from the East system, who was stuck behind a few players there. Hayes Perham, Chris Patolo, who unfortunately has just copped a bunch of head knocks in his, dozen games at first grade. That's just held him back. Jackson Topine, which is an interesting one, Coxby. Have you seen much of him in first grade? He's sort of an undersized back rower who the effort's there, but the size just isn't.
Yeah, he doesn't have a whole lot of size on him. I have seen him play.
Yeah. I like him as a possibility to take that utility gig, but I think they didn't bring Farmano Brown in and talk him up. Gus has for no reason. Other one is Brandon Clark is the new dummy half, sort of third choice, replacing Joshua Cook. They also have Samuel Hughes as a prop from the Parramatta system they picked up last year. Then you've got the young blokes, Jordan Samrani, Joseph O'Neill, Iverson Matai, Isaac Mataliavia Booth, and the other young bloke, Josh Reynolds. Geez, Josh Reynolds get a gig this year, mate. What happened?
I was about to say that to you. Is there a world where you see Josh Reynolds getting into that NRL team? And if so, how?
We've covered off the Kyle Flanagan question. If something happened to Flano, do they elevate Jay Reynolds?
If something happens to Flano, do you see that Brown then goes into there and then Reynolds goes to the bench, or do you see them? I mean, I guess it depends on his fitness, but are we going to see Reynolds in that coveted number 6 jersey again?
I think we see him in the 7. I really do. If something happens to Flanagan, I think Gus.
When you say something happens, you mean like anything, like no form, or he gets injured?
Probably more injury. So I don't think they can completely unhitch their wagon there, the way the roster's set up. But I can see Gus giving J Ray a chance and him actually be okay for a few games. He's certainly not the long-term answer there. But, Josh Reynolds, Bulldogs, circa 2011 to 2014 or 15. The bloke won a State of Origin series as a New South Wales player. He was in our halves when we broke the streak.
Yep.
And it wasn't because T. Hodkinson was the guy next to him. Like, those two were part of that system. They were Hayne and Farah in that spine, and that got the job done. Yes, it's 8 years ago or 9 years ago, but the point is he's got some pedigree regardless of what happened at the Tigers.
And you still think he's got moments in him. And I tend to agree. I'm not sure he would be there if there was no hope whatsoever that he could play at least moments of NRL again. So I don't think Gus would do that, just take up a spot,
Is he more chance of being, if Flanagan stays healthy, is he more of a chance of potentially that utility role to back up Reed Mahoney? Because Reed Mahoney, we need to talk about. We need to talk about him.
Yeah, we'll get to him in a second, but I think that there's a good chance that he could find himself in that number 14 role. And I guess relieve Reed Mahoney for 10 minutes at a time. And that way it's not a massive impact on him. He's not asking the ball play too much at 9. He's asking to, being asked to just distribute and kick every now and then. But he certainly wouldn't have the spark that Reed Mahoney has got, but not many players do. And he's probably a little bit of a like-for-like replacement. So I could see him doing that. I'm not saying he's going to, but I could see him doing that for sure.
Now, I wasn't what's the word? I actually like Jeremy Marshall-King, and I think he's a pretty good pickup for the Redcliffe Dolphins. But
I think Jeremy Marshall-King, certainly at the back end of his tenure with the Bulldogs, was a better player than he was at the beginning.
Yeah.
He didn't impress me one little bit in the first half of his tenure, but after that he started to probably a little bit of a late bloomer, and I think he is a good pickup for the Dolphins.
But Reed Mahoney is a massive upgrade.
Oh, absolutely.
Massive. Yeah. That's not a slot on JMK. It's just that Reed Mahoney is one of the best young hookers you're going to pick up anywhere. He really is that good, and he instantly makes them, I think, better defensively. I think he's really underrated in regards to how good he is defensively, and he is about to make the likes of TPJ, like Luke Thompson, even Kikau and Pele and those kind of guys really dangerous near the line. He is a weapon,
especially near the line.
Weapon at putting guys into holes near the line. I think it's a better pickup for Canterbury than Kikau.
I agree. I think he's their buy. I think if I look at their team, he's their buy of the year as far as he's the biggest difference maker in that team. Not taking anything away from Billy Kikau, because he's one of my favourite back rowers.
And played really well last year, Kikau. That was a great season.
100%. And didn't look like dropping off either.
No.
But Reed Mahoney is the biggest difference in this team to what it was last year.
How did Gus get him from Parramatta?
How do you
reckon that conversation? Honestly, how do you think that conversation went? What convinced? And I don't think it could have been just dollar signs. Well, it might have been. It is with players generally. We'll get to that later. But look, what do you think how do you think Gus's sweet talked him? What do you think he said to him?
Okay, all right. This is what I think he said.
Yep.
And this is without any knowledge whatsoever, but I'm merely speculating. But if it was me, and I'm trying to put myself in Gus's shoes for a moment, I would have said this. I would have said, mate, I think, and I think you know, that you're probably the best young prospect hooker in the comp. And I'm building a team over at the Bulldogs that will surpass what you're doing here at the Eels. You have to trust me on that.
Yeah.
And you could be the big difference maker in that team. And I need someone like you to come to the team to fast track our way back into the top 8. And I think you'll go further with us. And the Bulldogs have got a great history. And I think you're the type of player that will fit in perfectly with what we want to build. So if you want to come in, I'll give you $900,000 a year or 800, whatever it is. I'll sign you for 4 years or whatever you sign him for. And we're going to build the team around you and a couple of other young key players. What do you think?
I think that's bang on, apart from the first line, because there's a guy called Harry Grant who's pretty good. But that's the line. That's the line.
They're different players.
They're different players. That's the line of
Yep.
You can be the third or fourth banana at Parramatta.
Yep.
Or you can come in and change how we play football.
And here's the other thing, right? Not taking anything away from what Parramatta did in 2023, but I've got to be honest with you. I'm not saying Gus is thinking. Sorry, 2022. I'm not taking anything away from what they did, and I don't know what Gus is thinking, but I think they massively overachieved. I don't think they'll be in the grand final again anytime soon. And I see the Bulldogs as probably a better alternative to what's going to happen at Parramatta over the next. Parramatta are about to have their eyes pecked out, basically, and it started with Reed Mahoney, and Papali. Papali'i. So I think what's going to happen, I think, and I'm sorry, Parramatta fans, but Dylan Brown will be, you'll hold on to him because he's got the keys to the cash register. But bit by bit, Penasini will probably go to rugby union, maybe. And bit by bit, that team is going to disappear. Gutherson will be retiring soon, within the next 3 or 4 years. He's finished. So I guess let's get off the ship that probably has floated at its highest level before it starts to drop in the water a bit. And let's move to a new challenge. There's every chance that Reed Mahoney in the future, if he keeps going on the way he's going, will play State of Origin. He very nearly did last year, whatever it was. I think there is a better trajectory for Reed Mahoney at the Bulldogs than there was at Parramatta.
And he got paid very, very well. And I'm sure the Eels couldn't get near the price that the Bulldogs paid him.
Do we know what he got? Is it
it's not
within that?
I haven't seen it.
800 or 900?
My guess is it's in the 7 region. If I was speculating, which is something we never do on this show.
Never.
Talked about TPJ. He's off contract into 2024. So this is the year he needs to prove to Gus that he doesn't get a buyout or a little kick out the door. Crichton's coming next year. There goes another $800K. But that's the thing that is interesting about the way Gus has gone about things here is that, yes, he's opened the purse strings and, yes, he's got some key players. But I want to go back to that crop of youngsters that he's put into the mix because the smart way you manage your cap from an outsider looking in is, yes, you have to pay for your best players and you need to make sure you're paying your best players in positions that can make differences. A good example of that would be centre, I think, is one of those positions you just can't spend big money on. Now, admittedly, I'd say the same about wingers, but Adokar, probably the exception in that he started attracting players back to the club, et cetera, et cetera. So you got that occasionally. But the names, Semrani, O'Neill, Matalevia, Booth, et cetera, they're the ones that are in the Deb deals. Then you've got the likes of Skelton, Alamoti, Jacob Preston, Chris Patolo, Jackson Tapine, Brandon Clark, Franklin Pele. My point is all these guys aren't going to be on massive coin. So what you're doing is you're not only developing young blokes and giving them exposure to the first grade squad and the first grade opportunities, but you're not spending ridiculous money on roster spots 22 to 30.
Yep.
Look at the Dragons. What are they paying all those, borderline first grade guys who maybe were good 5 or 6 years ago? extreme example. We're probably punching bag the Dragons a bit, but the point is, when you clear off so much on your roster, which is what the Bulldogs did, and I'm just going to go back on this list again and just think about what you think they'd been on and the amount of money that this opens up. Shop, Jackson is obviously a high-quality player, but Marshall King, Vaughan would have been on big money, Corey Allen, Hetherington, Sam Anafangai, Stimson, Dufty, Wakeham. It all adds up, Cocksmith. And now they've replaced it with a bunch of blokes that are earning possibly the league minimum and maybe a couple of maybe in the 200s potentially.
Yep.
But this is how you retool your roster, as far as I'm concerned, is you've got to find the young blokes who can fill it out, who can get the exposure, and potentially be first graders. Because Gus is big about a bunch of these fellas. He says 24, 25, 26, that's when they're going to be part of our actual team. There's a plan here, Cocksmith, and I really, really like it. I do.
Gus has been quoted a number of times when he's talking about player lists and salary cap. He's not thinking about 2023. He's thinking about 2025 and 26 as to where he can go with the cap. And you have to do that, I guess, to stay ahead of trends and also stay ahead of, the way that we play the game at the moment versus 2026 could be very different, So he's switched on, mate. I mean, like I've said before, and I'm probably sounding like a broken record, and we're getting to the end of our love fest with Gus for the moment. But he's the best in the business.
Mm-hmm.
He's the best in the business. Forget about the others. There's no one does it like Gus does it. He's a bloke that had probably didn't do as much as he could have as a player through, maybe he says lack of talent.
I think injuries was a big reason.
Injuries. He had some pretty nasty injuries, but he's done everything as a coach, and now he's repeating it with what he's doing as a administrator. And I don't believe anyone, love him or hate him. I mean, when you're a commentator on Channel 9 and you're calling the games, you're going to polarize people. It's just the way it is. It comes with the territory. Gus doesn't care. Little story about Gus. I saw Gus a couple of years ago at a State of Origin, where we for the NRL, we had tables set up in one of the tunnels there. It was getting late in the evening. It was after the game, and Gus was probably a little bit tired of sitting outside with the big lights on him. So he came and sat in the tunnel. He just sat at one of the tables, didn't say a word, and he was just on his phone.
Yep.
There were people, grown men, probably 4 or 5 meters away, screaming at him, screaming obscenities, screaming, trying to bait him and whatnot. He did not lift his head once from the phone. He just kept doing what he was doing. I don't know if he was doing a crossword. I don't know if he was looking at when players are coming off contract or what he was doing. He didn't bite. He didn't even get annoyed. Didn't move. Just sat there and did what he was doing. And then when he got up to leave, he didn't even look at them. He just walked outside. Gus is unflappable, right?
Yep.
And he knows the game he wants to play as far as bringing players in and whatnot. And he just gets done what needs to get done. He's got in his mind what needs to happen, and he's unflappable, he's unstoppable. And if your club doesn't have Gus, you're already behind the 8 ball. That's all there is to it.
That leads me to the Ciraldo conversation, and we'll wrap the podcast up pretty shortly, people. But he's the one that Gus wanted. He's the one that Gus got. It's the one that Tim Sheens wanted, but it's the one that Gus got. He's talked about how smart he is, how switched on he is. The thing that Gus has often emphasised with Cam Ciraldo is the mateship and the bond he has with players. He talks about the fact that, might be speaking out of turn here, but it's like the anti-Seabolt.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they're both great with the X's and O's, but one seems to relate to players and one doesn't seem to even be able to get out of the boardroom. Okay. It's something that Gus has really pushed hard on. And I want to flip it to, that's great. And he's picked up Kikau, he's picked up Crichton. That's worked. Burton's obviously still there. That's fantastic. But Cameron Ciraldo as the new kid on the block and the one that everyone, and you gave him a pass at the start of the year. You said he's a good coach based on assistant coach. My point is we are really critical on a coach when he comes in and doesn't win. All right. We say can't do anything, Trent Barrett, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
This is where I look at the challenge for Ciraldo as he has to be patient in one key area. Penrith were a relentless football side that have been built over a number of years from when Gus decided that junior system needed an overhaul. And one of the things he's famous for saying on that 6 tackles with Gus is that we teach all our players, no matter what level they're playing, to play the style of football that they're going to play when they get to first grade. So if the front rowers need to pass, they pass. If the backs need to do extra work, they do extra work. That's how he set up his system. Ciraldo comes to the Bulldogs to a team that has been very bad for a while.
Yep.
He's had 3 months with him, Cocksmith, since he joined. My viewpoint is he needs to defer to Gus a little bit on how they need to play in 2023. Because if he comes in and decides we're going to turn this team into a relentless football side like Penrith, 3 months is simply not enough time to get that team physically ready to play that way. The mark for me of what is a successful year for Cam Ciraldo is that he realises this is a long game and doesn't try the win at all costs straight away approach, because that to me goes against, I think it's the trap that a few other coaches have got into, which is they walk in and say, we're going to change everything, we're going to win games because I'm here. I think Ciraldo walks in and he goes, and this is what you're saying about Gus not coaching, but he sort of says, Gus, where do you think this team is at? Where can I take it this year? Not so much where am I taking it? I'm not going to take us to the premiership in this season. I think that's the mentality that Ciraldo hopefully is able to adopt, because I just don't think you're going to see Canterbury make such a turnaround to play like Penrith this season. It may happen next year, and I think that's what Ciraldo want to do. But that's, to me, the big challenge for Ciraldo is he going to be willing, Cocksmith, to not overdo it this year? I guess is what I'm asking you.
Yeah, and to your point, I think they definitely had a conversation about the way that the team should play football, given that they're in the middle of a building phase.
Yeah,
and I think in the depths of their hopes and dreams, there'll be a number in mind as far as where they think they can end up from 1 through to 17. And they'll be probably aiming at that or just slightly higher than that. But I think I think that Gus probably had the conversation that, look, this is the style I think that the boys should play. What do you think? And there would have been an answer. And I reckon the answer was, yes, I think they should play that style. Okay, so let's coach them for that. Let's with the view to maybe get to a next destination a year. It'll be a constant kind of a slow upward curve. But yeah, I don't think they can. I don't think Ciraldo can come in and turn them into Penrith because they're not Penrith.
Yep.
So I agree with you that pressure will be on Ciraldo a little bit, but with Gus there overseeing things, I think the pressure is relieved a little bit. I think that side of it is taken away. And let's be honest, I mean, not being flippant about it, but he's got a 5-year deal, baby.
Yeah.
Life's good.
Do you reckon,
Life's wonderful.
You reckon the Gus, when he walked in there, he said to Cam, he goes, you're probably here for life if you want to be, but I'm just going to start with a 5-year deal just so Buzz gets triggered.
Absolutely. Why wouldn't he? Don't think for one sec. Gus has got a great sense of humour, I think.
Yeah.
He will do whatever he can to wind up Buzz Rothfield.
Well, you realise he posts on his Twitter every chance he gets shots of the Canterbury drone that apparently they couldn't afford. I love that. Everything on his Twitter accounts, just there's a little drone of some description in every photo he does. Finishing tier for the Bulldogs in 2023. Our tiers are 1 to 4, premiership contender, 5 to 10, top 8 contender, 11 to 14, not quite there yet, and 15 to 17, cellar dwellers. Where do you have the Bulldogs in 2023, buddy?
Where did they finish in 2021 and 2022?
The Question without notice.
Sorry, mate. I know. Get back to your stats page.
Really project. Come on down. Okay. Bulldogs in 2022 finished 12th with 7 wins.
Yep.
They finished last in 2021 with 3.
Correct.
15th of 16 teams with 3 wins in 2020, 12th the year before, 12th the year before that, and 11th the year before that. Last time the Bulldogs were in the finals was 2016.
They're going to finish in the second tier, mate.
5
to 10. Yep. They're going to finish in the second tier. I'm going to say they're going to finish 9th.
Yeah. I got them a tier below. I think 11 to 14 year, but I've got them in 11. But to be somewhat fence sitting, I've got them in 11th.
Okay.
So I just think, again, 7
I think they're
wins,
a player or 2 away.
7 wins needs to be 12 to 13 wins if you're going to make the 8.
Mm-hmm.
7 wins, I think, when you've won twice in a row the 2 years before that, is a step up. Another 5 is big. It's a big ask, and you can't let those games go, which bad teams generally do, and that's where I want to see the Bulldogs improve. If they get to 10 wins, I'd be content if I was a Bulldogs fan, and anything more than that is certainly bonus stage.
Something just occurred to me. For them to finish 8th, what do you, in a nutshell, very quickly, what do you think has to happen for them to finish 8th?
Teams have to fall over above them.
But who has to play? Who has to play really well? Who has to play out of their skin for them to finish 8th?
Oh, Burton. Burton's the key. Burton, who has a great kicking game, yeah. Pretty good running game, yeah. He's okay defensively, yeah. I want to see him organise that team better and be willing to get to the other side of the field when he has to and really go on my shoulders, boys, because he's going to have a hooker who can create opportunities around the ruck and get some momentum going through the middle because they've got a good enough forward pack, that's for sure. But I want to see Burton just unleash at car more of those first, second tackle kicks. What do you got to lose? Teams aren't ready for it. My point is, he's the guy that I think has to have a huge season for him to sniff the 8.
For me, there's about 4 players that need to play better than they've ever played before,
okay,
or as good as the best that they've played before, and that'd be Pangai,
yep,
Kikau, Mahoney, and Burton. And funnily enough, I think that they're the players that have the most pressure on them to play as well. So they're not. I don't believe they're going to make the 8, but I think they're going to finish 9th, maybe 10th. I think they're going to go close. They're going to knock off some big names.
Just to be clear, they had 7 wins last year. They had to win twice that amount of games to make the 8 last year.
Yep.
So you're going to have a full season of performance again to make it the way the ladder was last year. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. They underachieved last year, mate. They should have been better, but they just didn't have the cattle on the field.
Well, they were 12th after their second last win of the season in round 20 against the Knights. I was at that game, and then they lost 4 in a row and ended up finishing 12th because they won the last game. But they had a chance definitely to finish higher.
Yeah. But yeah, mate, I think the future's bright. And I think with the addition of 1 or 2 more players, which we will see for 2024, in Crichton at least being one of them, then they become top 8. That's when they become a top 8 team again, just with a little bit more class.
And you got 15 months of Ciraldo ball.
Yep.
You wanted to know their opening to the season. Here it is.
Yeah. What's it? First 6 games.
First game is Saturday afternoon at Brookie against Manly. Got to win that game, especially if Tommy's not running around for Manly. Then they head to Melbourne for a Saturday night game. We know something about Melbourne Storm, and that is they always start the season well. So I'm feeling 1-1 after 2 rounds. Then they've got a massive game at Belmore Sunday afternoon against the Tigers. Then they head across to Auckland to take on the Warriors in round 4.
Yep.
Back in Sydney at Accor Stadium to take on the Cowboys on a Sunday night game. And then they've got the Good Friday game against against South Sydney, and in round 7 they play Parramatta at CommBank.
Okay, I reckon after 6 they can be 3-3.
So you've got them beating Warriors, Tigers, and Manly. Is that right?
Yep.
But losing to the Cowboys, Rabbitohs, and Storm.
Yep. That's. I think on paper that can happen. So
yeah, I'm not out of the equation there. I think the key game there is that Manly one. They need to start that win, because if they drop that, they'd be 0-2 hole if they lose to Melbourne the next week, which is it's a bad way to start the year. They have the round 23 bye, speaking of how they finish. So round 23, they have the bye. It's a guaranteed, I think, 2 points. It hasn't been confirmed whether the team's going to get points for that. They play at Newcastle on a Sunday afternoon, at Canberra on a Sunday afternoon, at home to Manly on a Sunday afternoon, and away to the Titans on a Sunday afternoon. Their last 4 games are Newcastle, Canberra, Manly, Titans. If the Dogs are in contention for the top 8, that's a draw that says you should make it, because there's a good chance that, let's say, Canberra, Manly, and even, I can't say Titans, but maybe 2 of those teams are also contending for the 8, maybe, and probably 2 aren't. That's pretty much as good a draw as you're going to get to the back end of the year.
Yep, I think they can win at least 2 of those, and then they've got a bye as well. So I think they can win 2 of those games.
So you've got them in 9th. I've got them in 11th for season 2023. There were 2 other players I hadn't had on the list, because the way the contract thing works with the NRL, they might be training and trialling or be in that next tier. Harrison Edwards, who made his debut last year, I think he's still with the club. He's a back rower, and Curtis Moran is another one that aren't officially Bulldogs, but they're both in that mix, in case people were wondering where we were going. But we've got a long podcast already in the can. Now, do you want to talk about one more thing?
I do.
So everyone was here. Now, I didn't edit this podcast until later on Friday, and as a result, the RLPA put a bunch of clarifications and notes about the whole teal posts. So effectively what we're saying is based on the information before those came out. So please take that with a grain of salt. I think we still stick behind the fact that if they decide to strike, that's when it will be, and there's not really a lot of winners in this whole situation. Anyway, just thought I'd point out that we were, recording before that information came out from the RLPA.
I want to talk about what's happening with the RLPA and the NRL, mate. Are we going to see a strike, or what? What's going to happen?
I think we will.
You think we're going to see a strike? And what's that going to affect?
I'm talking about a pre-season strike. I'm seeing no All-Stars. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing no first week of pre-season.
Okay. And do you think the NRL would be well within their rights to then say to them, okay, we're not going to pay you for a month. We're going to dock your pays by 9%?
I don't know if they're within their rights. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how it all works.
Well, okay, maybe not within their legal rights. Do you think they're within their moral rights to say that?
I go back to how the game kept playing in 2020. And although I don't think that should carry weight forever, it seems to carry weight forever if you're talking about PVLs, running of the game. What I look at is the players were well looked after through that period, realistically. They didn't have to go on the COVID payments. They still got
They took pay cuts.
They took pay cuts. They still got paid well. And they got to play and not be completely bored with their life, like a lot of us. I think there's an element there that says you just got to be careful how you position it, players, because the little teal green Instagram thing that happened yesterday, I don't know what that's telling you. That was a really strange one. It was a strange choice of colour as well, because money is considered green, isn't it? But we keep getting told that it's not about money. I'm worried that the players are going to go down the US route because they see how it's done over there and how player power is the be all and end all. And I just don't know if they're in that bad a situation. I'm not saying that they're getting everything they want, but it feels like this is about, they want to say in how money is divvied up. They want to say in pretty much everything, because they are the product. And we've been in this position before, Cocksmith, and it doesn't end well for players when you go out in this direction with fans. Because clubs tend to be forever. Well, that wasn't completely true after Super League, but the clubs maintains, the player doesn't always. And I'm worried for the players that this is a case of, even if they do hold out for that first week, which I think is probably the worst case scenario, it's just not going to end well for them in the public perception.
Yeah, look, I have noticed a few negative things from a lot of negative comments on some social media posts about the money that the players get and whatnot, and it's very easy to be envious of a person that's making a lot of money for what some people perceive as an easy job compared to their daytime job.
Yeah,
I'm not sure it's an easy job, but
no.
it is very easy to fall foul of public opinion in this situation, especially when some players are making $1.3, $1.4, $1.5 million per year to effectively play up to 30 games of football a year. So it is difficult. But I said to you earlier on, do you think the players want more say in the way that the game's run? And you answered yes. Okay. And then I said, okay. And this is away from the pod. We had this conversation. I said, okay, some players, there's a big cross section of people within the playing ranks. You've got some really smart dudes who could be lawyers if they wanted to, or engineers, or dare I say it, doctors. There's some very smart people.
Or influencers. I mean, that's in the category, isn't it?
There's also some 22 or 23-year-olds running around that have the intellect of a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay. There's also some players that have in the past home invaded and assaulted people. There's also some players that have been charged with all sorts of horrible offences.
Yeah.
Do we want the playing group as a whole to have a say in the way that the money is dispersed? I say no. I say until they fail, I say that the people that are in charge have to be left to be in charge until they fail dismally in their way. And then if they do fail dismally, don't leave them in there just to divvy out the money that the players say. Eject them from the position and put somebody in that can run it. And that should be under constant review. I don't know by who, but shouldn't it be the ARLC? They're meant to be the independent board. They're not so independent when there's people.
It's not independent anymore because the game's run by the bloke who's chairing up that committee.
Right. So going forward, I say that the players shouldn't have. But have you got a solution in the next 4.5 minutes? Tell me, or the next minute. Do you have a solution?
Because one of the things that they brought up, one thing they brought up just before you get to the solution, that they had the issue with, and this is something this is the whole thing that spouted Recruitment Whisperers as a segment for us or as a sub show.
Yeah.
Players are willing to move at the drop of a hat if the contract's right. They are. Yep. That's clear. One of the sticking points that came out in the Fox Sports article today or yesterday is, we don't want to have an enforced recruitment transfer window. We can't possibly be told when we can sign with teams or not. You've got to give us 18 months, please. Yeah.
Please. We've seen players. We've seen players in the past
play that card.
Be extremely happy at the club they're in. Everything's beautiful. I love my life. Within 2 weeks, they're at another club because the other club has offered them $200,000 a year more. We've seen it. I mean, don't play the BS card, guys, because we've seen this. And I'm talking about players, player managers, but also the people at the NRL and clubs. Don't play the BS card. It's easily seen through. We can see it for what it is. My solution, because they keep talking about, we don't really want more money. And we're talking about players that are making $700,000 a year more plus. Are going, no. We want to help the little guys, the guys in the club that are on minimum wage. There's an easy solution: minimum wage for any player in the top 30, or a player that comes from the development into the top 30, $200,000 a year each. The salary cap remains the same, 12 point whatever it is, $2 million, $200,000 for everybody. It's the Oprah Winfrey of everybody gets $200,000.
Yeah. Check under your seat.
Check under your seat. There's $200,000 minimum. So everyone's taken care of then. Then we don't have to worry about anything else other than how we're going to pay the guys that are making $1.5 million. I think the players have to be really careful I think the players have to be really careful. I know that the game doesn't exist without the players. And I know that the game can't just rummage through the virtual rubbish bin and bring players in that aren't to a certain level. The game has to have a certain quality to the product. But I don't see this ending well if they go down the road of striking. I just don't see it, because I think that the NRL will lose trust. You mean the trust thing here is that the NRL disperses the money and pays the clubs that pay the players. But the other way that it works is that the players turn up and play the game.
Yep.
And if one side loses a big amount of trust, that is, they're not going to show up and play, or that is, they're not going to pay us. And the NRL have been paying. They've been paying them. I'm not on any side here. I hate to see this kind of stuff go down, because, you know, it affects everyone. You know, it affects the fans, it affects the media, it affects the players, it affects the people with the jobs at the NRL that, you know, we don't really know what they do, but they've got a job there. So it affects everyone. Anyway, but you can wrap it up, mate.
Let me pull this quote out from Kurt Capewell. This is yesterday, I think. The NRL have a belief that if they wait it out long enough, we're just going to have to sign the CBA, etc. But we're not going to stand here and cop it. We're ready to draw a line in the sand, and we'll make a stand. We don't want it to come to a player strike, but if the NRL is going to sit on their heels and not budge, who knows where it's going to go? That's why
they've obviously spoken about it.
That's why I'm saying that if anything's going to fall by the wayside, it's going to be the All-Stars game. That's going to go, and the first week of the preseason. There's my prediction.
I don't disagree with you.
All right.
I don't.
We did disagree on where the Bulldogs will finish. You've got them making the top 8. I've got them nowhere. No, it's not like it's not.
No.
You've got them in 9th and 11th. That is the deep dive into their team roster and recruitment. Well done, Gus.
Good job. Very good job.
And let's see what Cam Ciraldo has got in his kit bag. That's been episode 279 of Not the Footy Show. I've been Warrick Nicolson. That's been Robb Cox. Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs are down. I don't know what's going to be next, because we've covered off the really big movers and shakers. But Cocksmith, we had a few requests for maybe some contenders. They're just not as interesting as the teams outside the 8. That's the long and the short of it.
There's a lot of gossip. There's a lot of gossip around, but there's just not much movement. So let's text or talk on the phone, and we'll figure it out in the next 24 hours.
A new team early next week, and we also need to do a preview before you head off to the United States for your hamstring reconditioning stint. Correct. Yes, I need to run more freely. I'll talk to you soon, mate. All right, talk to you later. Take us out, Cocksmith. Pepsi. Not the Footy Show. You been sleeping over there? Pepsi.